on Monday, so what we did is we played around with Excel. Oh, by the way, it should be reminded, you should be noted, I should say. Don't forget, there's no class Monday for Labor Day. So what date is that? That would be what? Today's the 2nd. So it's the 7th. So on Monday, we played around with Excel, and what we're going to do today is do an example in detail. That's the plan right now. Why is this not working? So today, we'll do one in detail. So if you remember, the issue we were having on Monday was we wanted to make a histogram. So look, you can read in your book the definition of a histogram if you want. You can Google it. I'll be honest, I think of a histogram as a bar chart. Now, the built-in functions in Excel, the one we were using, has certain defaults, and it limits us. So what we want to do today is when we're going to make our sort of histogram, if you will, is we're not going to use the built-in function for a histogram. We're going to use a little more sophisticated tool called the frequency function. And what that's going to do is that is going to allow us to make our bins or break up our values in any way we would like to do. Now, some of this is going to seem over your head, and that's okay. You're learning this. Do not get worked up. You're going to have video to come back to and check it out. There's one subtlety that is going to get us caught, and you're going to see it later, but I'll foreshadow it. The thing is, with this frequency function, to do what we want it to do, we can't just press enter. We have to hit Control-Shift-Enter. And there's a reason for that, but I don't want to get into why. You're just going to have to know that to make this work, it's Control-Shift-Enter. And we'll explain that in detail later. Now, again, I ain't going to force you to do this on Excel. If you want to do it by hand and sketch it on paper, that is cool. I won't even be mad at you. But I'm telling you this as someone who's interested in your livelihoods, and I don't know you, but I hope you're successful, you know, when you leave here. I think it's important you learn Excel or some sort of software. And I don't know how many of you care to learn Python or MATLAB or any of these other things. Excel is very easy to learn. There's endless videos on the internet. Some are good, some are bad. Try to learn it. You'll be better off when you later on. You know. Okay, so let's do this. And so what I did is we're going to do the homework problem about the NFL teams. I got a few emails. Some of you are like, what do you mean by payroll? Well, payroll means how much money do you pay your employees. Now that can mean lots of different things. Typically with a sports team, when we say what is your payroll, that basically says what are you paying your players. Not necessarily the GMs, not necessarily the people who clean the bathrooms. What do you pay the players? And that's usually not hard to find. So I'll show you what I did and how I got this. So I forget what problem this is on the homework. Let's look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share. Is it 5, the one? Okay. So very good, Andy. All right. So we will work on number 5 for you. Now, just because I'm going to do it a certain way doesn't mean if you've done it differently, you're wrong, right? There is more than one way to do this. In fact, I've been very vague with what I meant. Did I even tell you what an ogive is or whatever? Did I even mention that yet? No, I didn't. Did I even write a definition of a histogram? No, I didn't. I am leaving lots of this up to you. You're the statistician. Amateur as you may be, you're the statistician. What are you going to do? So what I'm going to do is how I would do it. Maybe you do it differently. Maybe you use Excel. Maybe you use some other software. Maybe you do it by hand. I don't care. Are we cool with this? The more you get out of this will depend on how much you put into it. But that's anything in life, right? You walk them out, you walk them out. You ain't going to get as much as someone who walks 5 miles. You shoot 1,000 free throws a day, you're likely going to be better than someone that shoots 10 free throws a day. It's just the way life is. Ain't no one going, unless you got a little fairy that's going to fly around in 3 years and say, here, I love you, here. That ain't how it works. I don't think it does. I could use a fairy. That'd be nice. All right. Okay, so what I did is, and I already got the data entered because it's easier, but let me show you how I went about doing this. So I went to the internet. You will see it in a second, I hope. Is everybody seeing the internet? Back at home in La La Land, we're seeing it here. Good. Let me just double check. Get this stupid thing out of my face. Honest to God. Yes. All right, Ethan. Thank you. So what I did is I went to the Google machine, and this is not the one. Where's my page at? And what I did is I just Googled. Let me show you what I did. I Googled NFL team payrolls. That's all I Googled. And then what I did is I scrolled down. And what's that? Anybody? Oh, somehow that's something. So I scrolled down, and then I just looked at this one. I picked this one randomly. I didn't even check the other ones. I just.
Are we supposed to be seeing someone's schedule?
What's that? We're
seeing like your advisee roster schedule or something.
That's not good. Why are you seeing that? You don't want to see that. Are you seeing the payrolls now?
Yep, now we are.
Very good. Now let's hope that you see it when I move. Now, when I hit this button, so once again, all I did, if you go up here, I Google searched NFL team payrolls. And I scrolled down. Maybe you pick a couple that you want. I just picked this one. So make sure you guys are seeing that. Are you guys seeing this sort of chart? And so what I did is I manually took these numbers and I plugged them into Excel. That's what I did. So to save us time, I did that before. There they are. I don't care what the team name is right now. I'm just interested in the numbers. So maybe I will title this payrolls. And you'll notice, I guess I should go back to what I was sharing. So let me, you'll notice that, why is it not showing you this? You'll notice this says 2018-19. So since I chose these ones, did I say on the homework what year to choose? I didn't. I mean, I guess you could say I was assuming the most recent year, but it doesn't matter. The purpose is the stats, not what year. And so if I go to my share, let's go to my Excel. So everybody should be seeing Excel. So what I like to do is I like to sort of label these things so that I can see what's happening. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen this. And then I showed you this button you could use before. I'm going to use merge and center and then wrap text. And then what it does is it puts it all in the same cell for me. And maybe you like things to be centered. So you hit these center buttons up here. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some basic statistics. The ones we talked about in class. We talked about the median. We talked about the mode, right? We talked about the mean. We talked about the standard deviation, all that stuff. Now, on the homework, I sort of broke the problem into pieces. I said, okay, do this piece, then do that piece. I don't really care how you do it. What I am interested in is that you do some sort of analysis. That is what I am interested in. The first thing you should probably do is you should probably save things, though. That's always good. So I might go file, and then let's go save as. Find a good place to save it. For now, maybe I'll save it to, well, here, I'll save it to this class. So we'll go desktop. Oh, not Lydia's school. You don't care about that. Fall 2020, 1040. So let's do NFL payrolls. And then I'll save it. So at this point, does anybody have a question or a comment? Of course, we haven't really done anything groundbreaking yet. All right, I'll take your silence as none. So the first thing the problem asks us to do is use 10 classes to construct a frequency distribution. Okay, so this is sort of what we were talking about on Monday. And this is what I said, you can do it manually. And that's what we did at first, right? We broke it up and then we did it manually. But there's got to be a better way, particularly if we have lots of data. And what I was trying to sort of give you the impression of is that a lot of times we can learn by playing, thinking of Excel as a toy box, moving around, looking at options. But when we did that on Monday, we didn't get many places. We sort of got stuck, if you will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a frequency table. So what I'll do is I'm going to put it right here. So what I think I'll do is I will sort of merge these three guys right here. And what I'm going to write here is I'm going to write frequency table. If I can spell it correctly would be nice. And then I like these things to be centered, so I'll make it centered. Maybe I'll capitalize the first letters to make it look pretty. And so what do I need to do to make a frequency table? Well, I need to make, actually what I'll do is I'm just going to make it 2 columns. So how do I make a frequency? I need my bins, and then I need what? I need to know how many counts. So maybe I'll just say for now counts in bin. And then again, I like to wrap this and merge it so it looks sort of pretty. So I need to figure out how I want to break it up. It said to me to use 10. Now maybe 10's a good number to break it up in, maybe it's not, I don't know. So we need to figure out what exactly do we want to use for our bins. So when we did the example on Monday, we were using numbers that were like between 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. So we thought of a way to divide that up, right? So if I look at my range, my largest number is 271. My smallest number, and by the way, these are in millions, if that wasn't clear to you. My smallest is 174. Well, you know, maybe they're paying them in pesos lately. Think about how many years it'll take us to make $1 million. Woo! After they take out that 100-some grand for your sheet of paper, right? What a time. I always say that you get good at something, someone will pay you to go to school. Ain't that something? Because you guys will be crying. That ain't fair. Athletes get scholarships. Fool, get good at something. Get good at math, they pay you to go to school. Get good at basketball, they pay you to go to school. It ain't fair, it's life. Anyhow, that's my rant. Cool. So what do we want our bins to be? So one way to think about this is to think about the range of your values. What are the range of our values? So we can easily just say, just do some basic calculator. It was 271 all the way down to 174. So basically our range was like 100 roughly, right? We don't even have to be perfect. So maybe we do it every 10. Does that make sense? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with my lowest range. So say I want my first range to be up to like 180. So let me say I'll do 180. And then the next one would be 190. So before I go any further, what I'm saying is the first count I'm going to count, the first box, my first bin, is going to count how many teams are paying less than 180 million. Does that make sense? And then my next bin will collect how many teams are paying between 180 and 190. We following this? Okay, then it'll be 200, then 210, 220, 230, 240, 250, 260, 270, 280, and then how many do we have? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Wait, do I have too many? Yeah, I have too many. I don't need that last one. So I should have 10 values. And remember, I showed you this little trick to count how many values you have. If you highlight your columns and then you look in this left-hand corner, well, I let go. If you look in this left-hand corner where you see 8R, X1C, 9R. So this tells me that 10R says that I have 10 rows in this particular column that I'm highlighting. So I have my 10 bins right there. Right? Okay, now here's the key point that we couldn't figure out on Monday. Right? Hopefully you were so intrigued by what we did Monday, you went home and learned it, but I highly doubt it. You're like, I'll wait till Wednesday. Fat Man said we'll do it together Wednesday. We'll do it Wednesday. So here's the trick. You could go down and count and put them in if you wanted to. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a shortcut to this. And the shortcut uses what's called the frequency function. Now, if you want it to work properly, you have to do it a certain way. So let me show you how it's going to work. Just for fun, let's see how many are less than 180. How many are less than 180? When we get on here, there's just what? One, right? There's only one that's less than 180. So yeah, what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to hit this function button, and I'm going to hit frequency. And then I am going to ask it, the first thing frequency wants to know is it wants to know what data am I looking at? What am I looking at? What am I studying? So that's your data array. And then frequency needs another array. It wants to know where to put the data. Frequency wants to do the counting for you. It wants to go up and down your list and say, you're in this range, I'll put you in this bin. You're in this range, I'll put you in that bin. It wants to count. What we did together on Monday when we counted by hand how many scores were between these values, frequency will do it for us. Here's the subtlety. And by the way, you might be saying, why is it calling it frequency? Well, that's what it does. Frequency function goes in that list. It's going to go in this list, and it's going to pick out how to divide them into which bins. So we don't have to do it by hand. Now, another thing to note is think about how nice that is if your data wasn't even in order. Okay, so the first thing I do is I highlight all my data. Now I need to know what are my bin sizes? How am I going to distribute my data? So a good way to think of this is if you're packing something up at your house or your apartment or your dorm, you have 10 bins. You're going to put your socks in this bin. You're going to put your shirts in this bin. You're going to put your cups and your dishes in this bin, right? We're going to separate things. Now here we have numerical data. So we're going to put all the numbers in this range in one bin. We're going to put all the numbers in another range in this bin. All the salaries in this range in another bin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now highlight my bins because that's going to tell me, I hit the wrong one. Sorry. Pardon me, I messed up. Go back. Hit that. Good. Now I have to see what my bins are. To get my bins, I have to highlight the bins. And now I'm going to hit OK. And you'll see that it counts 1. We expected it to get 1. So we feel good that we did it right. Now, is anybody here familiar at all with Excel? You a little bit? So one of the tricks you learn in Excel is if you use a function once, you can get it to generate data everywhere by doing this. And so a common mistake is you might just pull this and drag down, and then it fills these things in. Now, this ain't correct right now. How do I know it's not correct? Well, first off, if this were correct, all these numbers highlighted should add up to what? How many teams do I have? There are 32, which means if this was correctly showing you how many were in all the bins total, I should get 32. That ain't what it gave me, right? Not correct. So we say that's bad news. So what we need to do is we need to say, okay, let's delete this. Something is not right. Yes.
I'm doing it along with you, and mine gave me 32.
Did you hit Control, Shift, Enter? Really? It worked. It shouldn't, though. Wonder if that was a coincidence? Wonder what it gave you 32. So if you added them all up, it gave you 32? And you did it exactly what I did. Which, okay, what year Excel do you have? Is it 2020? Do you know what year it is? I wonder if the function is more adaptive now. Because I'm going to show you how to get it to work. I have Excel 2016. You might have a newer version. That's interesting that yours worked like that. That's good. That's good news that it worked that way. I hope it's correct, though. I hope it wasn't just a coincidence. Very good. All right. So what we're talking about is someone, what's your name, by the way? I don't even know you. Sammy. Sammy, Sammy did it exactly how I did it, and it actually gave her what we think are the correct answers, although we're not positive yet. How many did it give you in your 270 bin? Just one?
Yeah, but it said it overflowed because we took away that 280.
Right, so that's a good thing. So first off, that's a good point. So I'm guessing you have a newer version of Excel that does it automatically.
I'm trying to figure out what it is.
Well, don't worry about it right now. So that's the first, that's also a good point. So that's a very good point, because if you look at our bins, the way we have our bins set up is we have nowhere to store 271, right? So what we should be doing is we should be, instead of having 270 here, maybe we have 275 so it catches that last one. Do you understand that? That's the first subtlety. All right, so Sammy's worked, mine doesn't. So if you have an older version of Excel, you're going to have to do it the O'Grady way.
So mine says version 2007. I don't know if that's right, but
That's really, that's interesting. I'd have to check it out. I don't know why yours works doing it that way and mine doesn't. So anyhow, here, let me show you how I would do it. Instead of highlighting just this creature, instead of just doing the top one, I'm going to highlight the whole column that matches next. All right. Then I'm going to hit the function button, and I'm going to do frequency. And then once again, I'm going to highlight all my data. That's going to be my data column. And then I have to do my bin column. My bin will be over here. And now I'm going to hit OK, and nothing happened, except I got the 1 again, which is okay. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remember that O'Grady kept talking about this Control-Shift-Enter nonsense. So I'm going to go back and highlight this 1. And for those of you unfamiliar with how Excel works, up here on this bar, this is telling you what is the corresponding thing in this cell down here. And so I want this frequency thing to generate this way. So if I put notice my cursor's there, it's blanking. And so if I would just hit enter, it's going to do what it did before. But if I hit Control-Shift-Enter, why did it not work? Now we're in trouble. That didn't work properly. No. What did I do wrong now? Oh, Grady. Try it again. When in doubt. Now I'm going to have to fire myself. Why is it not working? Hold on 1 second. Bear with me 1 second. Now, yours working has made me not understand why mine's not working. Let me see something real quick. Let me mute this in case I have to go somewhere. We can't have you seeing personal information. What are you guys seeing at home? You still seeing Excel at home? You should be. That's good.
Yeah, I'm just.
Okay. What are you seeing now? Still Excel?
Yep, still Excel.
All right. Oh my goodness gracious. Come on. Hold on a second. Now I'm losing. I got to go check my other file just to make sure I didn't make the same silly mistake I made before. All right. Let's try this again. Let's try one more time. If not, we retire. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. All right, so for whatever reason, we're having trouble now. There we go. All right, so I got it to, you guys weren't even watching it. Why aren't you guys seeing this now? What is happening?
I'm seeing on Excel on.
You guys should at home. Oh, that's why. I had the wrong screen for him here. Okay, so let me explain again what I did to try to make this clear. So, by the way, you'll notice that make sure did you get the same numbers as me? Can you verify that? Just for fun, I'm going to sum them up just to make sure that I got 32. So if I hit my sum button, I am going to just sum them up. And you'll see that I did, in fact, get my 32. So I'm just doing that to test myself, to make sure that I feel, I don't know for sure that I'm correct, that means I'm in the right path. Yeah. Uh-oh, then maybe yours isn't doing it right. You got to be careful then. Because I can verify that this seems correct right now, because how do I feel confident it's correct? Well, let me read down my list. How many guys do I have bigger than two, or bigger than, excuse me, how many guys do I have between 260 and 275? I have 2, right? These 2 are between 260 and 275. How many do I have between 260 and 250? I have 1. How many do I have between 240 and 250? I have 3, as it says, right? Now, how many do I have down here? I have these 2. Then how many do I have between 220 and 230? Well, I have these 7. So I'm confident that it did it correctly. Now, another subtlety you might not be familiar with is that, what is it counting? Is it including 180 in the bin, or is it including it up to 180, right? So remember in like math class, you'd have these inequalities where it'd be less than or equal to. Think about what's it considering. Is it considering, so, okay, I'll give you an example. If you look at 240 right here, this number, some team is spending 240 million. What bin is this going in? Is this going in the bin between 230 and 240, or is it going in the bin 240 and 250? Yeah, you have to reason which one, the way it's doing it. And then once you do it a few times, you'll be good to go. Okay, does anybody have a question? Sammy, we're gonna have to figure out what yours did then, because that's. So let me explain one more time how this works so that everybody is clear, and ask a question. So I delete this. I'm going to delete it. So what I want to do is I'm going to highlight all the column where everything matches the column next to it. So I highlight this. Now I am going to hit the frequency function. And then I'm going to put my data in for my data, and now I'm going to enter how I want to divide it up, how I want to analyze it. Now, I am not just going to hit enter. I'm not just going to click OK. If I do that, I'm going to get the same thing I had before, which didn't make sense. And that's a whole other story. What was it actually doing there? What I want to do now is I want to hit Control Shift Enter all at the same time. Control Shift Enter. And when I do that, it generates the whole column. Does anybody have a question about this? Okay, once you make this, once you do this, the histogram, the bar chart, whatever you want to call it, is easy. So now we have this table. The histogram, all it is it's a visual of this table. Instead of just having a chart of numbers, now we're going to have some pretty picture. We can make it colors. We can adjust it. How do I make a picture? Well, just like we did last class, I'm going to highlight it all. Highlight both columns. Then there's this button right here that does a quick analysis. What do I want? Do I want a chart? If I want a chart, that's great. So I can go to however I want to do it. I can do this. And now I have this beautiful table. Now you may say something like, well, I know a histogram says that the bars are supposed to touch, right? Maybe you look that up and you say histogram, well, let's adjust it. How do we make the bars fatter? Right click on a bar. And you could do things like format the data. So I can make my gap width 0 if I wanted. And now I have a different type of chart. And all I can do now is I can play around. I can right click on here. I can make the title. I can say, I can call it NFL payrolls. I can change the color. I can change the style. So I'm not using the histogram function. I'm using just the chart. And then I can adjust this. I can label my axes. If I right click on there, I can format my axes. And then I can do all kinds of stuff to make it visually appealing to me. And everybody can do their own. You can just leave it as it is. You can be unique as you want to be. You might want to change these tick marks. You might want to say, I don't like the tick marks. Maybe you want to change labels. You can do all this stuff, and the only way you're going to get good at it or figure out what you like is by doing it. Does that make sense? Does anybody have a question about this? Yeah. To get what? What did you want to get? To get this picture? So to get the picture, let's delete it. Can't hurt to try it again. We'll cut it out of there. So how do I get it? I highlight both columns. There's a few ways you can do it. You can either click this button down here, or similarly, you can right click and do quick analysis. And then I go to charts and then just do a cluster like this. And then look, if you look at the top of the screen, there's lots of options. You can change it if you'd like. You want to get, these are built-in options. Oh, this is good. It almost looks like they're stacking coins. Here's another way of visual. So there's all these different ways of visualizing it, right? Now, one thing you might want to do, here's what I suggested, is you can right click on any column and you could do format data series. And that allows you to sort of shrink the gap width so it looks more traditionally like a histogram. You might even want to format, like I said, your axes. You can do things like relabel it if you wanted. So you'll notice that the way it's doing my axes is it's doing it automatically. It's going to say, okay, here's your range. Your range is between 1 and 8. Well, 1 and 7, really. So it's going to scale it that way. It's going to make my y-axis up to 8. It's going to make my x-axis spread that way. And I can adjust all this. So maybe I do this differently. What happens if I hit at category number, whatever that means? And maybe I say, what's 2? I don't even know what this is going to do. And I hit enter. Doesn't look like it did much. I'm confused. So maybe I'll just go back to automatic and see what it did. Okay. And so you can play around with all this to make it look however you want to look. Make it yours, if you will. Does anybody have a question, comment? This is the hardest part, is getting a pretty picture, at least to display your data. The other stuff is not too difficult. We'll get to that in a second. So what we've done, for those of you keeping score at home, is this thing right here, this frequency table, which I'll highlight, this is, you know, we often call this a frequency distribution or a frequency table. This is sort of, you could call this a histogram. Now, what is the ogive or the ogive or however you want to say it? So what is that? That is sort of like a way to see how everything accumulates from low to high. So some of you, I'm imagining very few of you have any sort of, because we're going to learn a lot of it this class, very few of you are limited exposure to like probability and the difference between a probability distribution and a cumulative distribution and what these things mean. So the ogive is going to sort of add up things as we move along. So it sort of shows you a different flavor of this. And we're going to get to that in a second. But since we spent some time on this chart, before we do another one, let's go do the basic statistics and then we'll come back to the next picture. Is that clear? So just let's call this NFL payrolls. So let's say distribution of payrolls. Sounds like a nice way to name it. Now, one thing I would do if this were me, I would look at how the axis is labeled at the bottom, because it's kind of misleading. This almost makes you feel like there's one team that pays exactly 180. There's 2 teams that pay exactly 190, right? So how can we reformat our x-axis, our horizontal axis, so that it's more revealing of what we're trying to show? Does that make sense? Okay, so let's do some basic statistics before we do any of that. So here I'm going to do that. I'm going to I'll put my mean here. What did I ask us to find? I asked us to find the mean. Then we can find the median. We can find the mode. And then we are supposed to find the standard deviation and the variance. So let's do the mean first. By the way, you know I have to have these centered. That's the only way. So what's the mean? Well, we hit the function button. And we have to remember that that's the average. So we'll hit OK. And then what is our data? Our data is all this. And so we hit OK. And there's our mean. Our mean NFL salary or payroll is 219 million. So let's highlight that a color to separate it. Make it. Is everybody okay with that piece? And then how do we do the median? Well, we do the same thing. Is there a median button? Let's hope. So I type in median. Oh, yes, there is. Very good. And so we hit median, and then we highlight the same data. By the way, there's a shortcut. If you get good at this, you can start remembering what it is. It's B4 to B35. So by the way, for those of you who aren't sure what that means, is if you see this B4 colon B35, that means it says you take column B and you start in the 4th row and you go all the way to the 35th row. That's 32 numbers because I've subtracted off the first 3 rows. So you can remember that, or if you want to do, you can even copy and paste that. All right, but anyhow, it's there, so we hit enter. And we get 217. So let's highlight that. A different color. Let's say we use this. And then lastly, we'll do our mode. And we saw already that that's built in. It showed up when I typed median. So here's mode. No, cancel. So the mode, hit OK. And then, of course, what numbers do I want to consider? It's B4 to B35. And you'll see the mode here is 245. So what's interesting here is that the median and the mean are relatively close, but the mode is a much higher. So you might say, is that correct? No. What does mode mean? That means what? What's that? Yeah. And how many 245s do we have? What's that? Is that the only time we have multiple numbers? No. What's that? Yeah, so why did it do 245 then? Maybe their default thing in Excel is to use the highest number that comes in there, right? That's a question you might want to ask Google or Excel. I don't know, I'm asking you. No, I have two 224s. But that's a good question. You could ask yourself, is it doing what I think it's doing? Okay. All right, so the next thing we asked you to find was the variance and then standard deviation. So variance Yeah. I can't hear what you're saying. I'm sorry. When I highlight the whole thing, this, oh, when I did this, all I was doing is, this is just aesthetics for me. It's like natural, it's just in my instincts. I am hitting this button right here. Do you see these? What these do is these buttons, the top one says we're going to center it in the cell vertically, and the bottom one says we're going to center it in the column horizontal. It's hard to even see what that means, but if you made these cells larger, it's where the text goes in the cell. Is it centered? Because that's what I just wanted to center. I'll give you an example. Look over here. These things aren't centered in the cell, right? So if I hit this button, it's going to center them in the middle, up and down, which you didn't notice anything because they're so small, the cells. But then when I hit this one, it's going to shift them to the center, left and right. Watch. Bing. See what I'm saying? Yeah, I should have explained that. You don't have to do that. That's just like my instincts. Yeah. No, that's why you ask, right? We ask questions. That's the key. All right, so the variance. Now look, when we do variance, don't forget there's a very important thing. Are we doing a sample or are we doing population? Well, how many NFL teams are there? There's only 32. We got all of them, so we have the whole population. So we want population variance. And in turn, we're also going to want population standard deviation. So I go underneath, I hit the function, and we want the variance P. It's already there for us. And remember, we want of the whole column, so that's B4 to B35. We hit enter, and we get 508.5586. Now, does that make sense? And then the last thing we're going to do is our standard deviation, which I'll just denote SD. And I'll center it because I'm annoyed when it doesn't do it. And if I want to do standard deviation, does that come up? So let's say standard deviation. And we need to make sure it's population. And so we hit that. And then once again, we need B4 all the way to B35. And we see the standard deviation, which is just a square root of the variance is 22, blah, blah, blah. So let's highlight this nice color. It's always nice to make it look pretty. Does anybody have a question about this? So one of the things you'll notice is that if you look at our data, what we're often interested in is how is the distribution? What does the visual look like with respect to the median and the mean? And you might even say a little bit, since there's a larger concentration bigger than, say, 220. There's 7 that are bigger than 220. You might say that that's a little more concentration is higher than the mean. Does that make sense? It's not right in the center. And maybe you don't get that yet, what I mean, but that's one of the things we hope you start to understand. I mentioned this when we talked about the distribution of height versus wealth. And I said how if you look at the distribution of wealth, it's very, very gradual, then it jumps up at the end. Whereas the distribution of heights would be more like that. So these are things to consider. Okay. Does anybody have a question? Comment? Okay, so the last thing we want to talk about is we want to talk about this ogive or ogive, however you want to pronounce it. What that does is that asks us how the data accumulates. And that's sort of what we talk about. Like if you look at heights, heights accumulate, they go up and then back down. There's not a heck of a lot of 7-foot tall people. There's not a heck of a lot of 3-foot tall people. Most people are all around the middle. Whereas wealth, there's not a lot of wealth for almost everybody. And then at the very tip, the small portion of all the people have all the wealth. So it accumulates very slowly and then large at the end. Whereas with heights, it accumulates slowly, then a bunch accumulates, and then it accumulates slow again. And right now you might be saying, I don't actually know what you mean by that, O'Grady. Okay, so here's one way to do it. What we want to do is we want to count how the frequencies change. So there's a couple ways you can do this using fancy, using the fancy commands, but we already used the fancy command once to give us our frequency table. Now let's just use our mind to count how this happens. So here's the way you would think about this. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say cumulative frequency. And then, of course, I'm going to highlight this thing because that's how I like to do it. And I want to merge, or I want to wrap text so it looks like this. And then center it. And then I'm going to widen this guy a little bit just so I see what it does. Now what I'm going to do is count. How many do I have in the first one? Well, there's only one, right? Then how many do I have after the first two? I have 3, right? Because there's 1 in the first one and there's 2 in the second. How many do I have after 3? Well, now I'm going to add 5. So if I had 3 and I had 5, now I have 8. Then I'm going to add 3 more. That puts me at 11. Now I'm going to add 6. That puts me at 19. Now I'm going to add 7. That puts me at 26. Now I'm going to add 2. That puts me at 28. Now I'm going to add 3. That puts me at 31. Now it looks like we may have made an error because now if I add 1, yeah, I know. So what should it be? 17. Very good. And then 17 and 7 is 24. And then 26. And then 29. And then 30. And then we add 2 and we get 32. Now you might sit at home and say, well, you never told us what an ogive is. How am I supposed to know? And let me repeat you 47,000 times. I am not going to sit here and write definitions on the board. That is not how we learn. You can Google this. You can read it in a book. I am suggesting that one way to visualize your data is this thing called an ogive or an ogive, or however you want to pronounce it. And so now we just want to make a chart using it. So how can I make a chart? Well, I want to do it the same way I did before. I want my bins to be along the bottom, or my range of salaries. But now, instead of looking at bars, I want to see how it accumulates as we go from the smallest salary up to the largest salary. So how can we do that? Before I do that, does anybody have a question? So your cumulative frequency better equal 32, or it better equal your total number of data no matter what. Okay, so how do we make a chart? Well, what we want to do is we want to highlight that we want this to be something, but we also want to highlight this because we want, the way to think about these charts is think about math. You have a horizontal axis and a y-axis. And in your math classes, you learn, you call one your domain, one your range, or stuff like that. And you think about the first column you highlight is going to be your input, your horizontal axis, and then your second column will be your output of your quote-unquote function or your data. And so I want to highlight two columns. So what I can do is I hit Control, and then I scroll down, and now I've got two non-adjacent columns highlighted. Is that clear? So that's a subtlety too. Two non-adjacent columns. In order to do that, let me remind you again. I first highlight this column, but if I just try to highlight the second one, bad news. So I highlight the first, then I hold Control, and I highlight this. Now, I should say this. I don't know what a Mac does. If you have a Mac, you got a Mac. I don't know what the heck Control is on that. You're going to have to ask. I don't know. You can figure it out, though. I have confidence. And I don't know if you do Control-Shift-Enter on there either, so I should have mentioned that. There's probably something else that you do. Or you just get more fancy software that does everything automatically. Or you pay someone to do your statistics for you. Then you don't have to do anything. That requires you to be rich. And then usually to get rich, you kind of have to be good at this stuff to begin with to get a good job. So it's like an endless cycle of viciousness. Happy Wednesday, by the way. Okay, so now I can do the same thing. If I right-click, what happens? Well, how come I can't do my quick analysis? When I right-click, why can't I do it? Well, this time we have to be a little more careful. We can't just right-click because it only will let you right-click. That's only built in if they're adjacent, because then it's obvious to the computer what you're trying to do. At least it's convention-wise. So I'm going to go up to the Insert button. And then I'm going to insert. What do I want to insert? I want to insert a chart. That's what I've been doing, right? So let's go Insert. We have a chart. And a good way to make an OGIV is to do a scatter chart. So you can even click what's recommended. Well, this one looks perfect. That almost looks like a darn OGIV. And so I hit this thing and hit OK, or no jive, and now I get this picture. Which I'm going to move over here a little bit. And now this shows you, and of course my axis is not exactly what I want. I might want to shift this. But what this chart shows you is it's showing you how the salaries accumulate. So as you would imagine, the steepest part of the curve is in the middle because you would imagine there's more people bunched in the middle than at the tails. You would think, right? And so maybe we go to our axes and we say we don't like that axis. So maybe we want to do our axes. So our minimum, let's maybe not say 0 because that's very misleading. What if we do, how about 150? And now I've changed my title or my x-axis. And so now it's more representative of what's happening. Does anybody have a question about this? Now, you might say that this chart does nothing to sort of explain how NFL payrolls are distributed. So one of the things you'll notice on the homework is if you read, is particularly the last couple, or excuse me, the last problem, number 7. One of the things I ask you to do is describe what you can infer. Can you infer anything? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Like if I said to you, what can you infer from this? You could say, well, I infer that you might say something obvious like, well, there's 7 teams that spend between 220 and 230 million. Okay, but what can we learn from this? Not just telling us how things behave. Can we learn anything? Can we recognize patterns, stuff like that? And these are the things you ask yourself anytime you're analyzing some data. Does anybody have a question? Now, most likely, if you go home and try to reproduce this, you're going to mess up. You're going to forget the Control-Shift-Enter. You're going to forget some of this stuff. And look, the best piece of advice I can give you is keep trying, keep trying. Now, of course, you can take this video out that we did and you can mimic it. And then try, instead of mimicking it on this problem, just write out, you know, just go get some other data. Maybe you don't want to do 32, maybe you do 15 or something, and then don't use 10 bins, use 5 bins and see what you can get. All right? Or go look at other people's work on the internet. I'm sure you can find this stuff otherwise. All right, listen, I'll let you guys go. I appreciate it. If you have questions, let me know. I know this isn't the easiest stuff to do, but it is a good learning experience, at least in my opinion. So hopefully you'll trust me and do that. I should write this down. So 2 things to remember before you forget. You guys are free to go, but just in case, and you can see this later. So key ideas: Control plus Shift plus Enter with the frequency function. So that's a lot to swallow in one day. But anyhow, thank you guys very much. I won't see you Monday, no class. See you Wednesday. So I'll extend the due date on this if you'd like. All right, guys. Thank you. Take care. Bye. All right, Bo. See you, man.